to the Business Blueprint Podcast, where we take you on an exciting adventure through our triumphs and challenges and failures in creating and maintaining a thriving 6, 7, and 8-figure business. Get ready to dive into our strategies, decisions, and yes, even valuable lessons we've learned from our missteps. But that's not all. We'll also bring you industry-leading guests who will provide you with their priceless insights and wisdom. Stay tuned because the captivating journey of the Business Blueprint begins right now. Hi, I'm Charles Hatley, and this is the Business Blueprint, where each week we talk about things going on in our business that are kind of top of mind to us. Today, I'm joined by Dan Cuneo and Rebecca Ballone, and what we're going to talk about is business continuity planning. You know, in the small business world, sometimes we forget to think about how to plan for when things don't go right because we're so used to having to put out fires every single day, it may feel like nothing ever goes right. So over the past week, I was off-site working on my 2025 business plan. And in doing so, one of the experts or coaches or whatever you want to call them was talking about business continuity plan. He had worked at Experian when Experian got hacked. And so he came in and not a single vendor wanted to work with Experian in the entire country because they had just got hacked. It's Experian. They know everybody's private data. And he was part of the team that really got Experian back on track. And the way they did this was through a business continuity plan. So I wanted to start off, Dan, can you kind of explain to us what a business continuity plan is and why you would need one?
Sure. This is something that a lot of companies or firms don't really think about as they're getting started because they're more focused on generating the clients, generating the revenue. What am I going to be? And what does the big picture look like as far as big picture on the company itself? And sometimes getting lost in the weeds or the details, or even being myopic in the sense of just focusing on certain things in the business. But the business continuity plan, a lot of people refer to as like the BCPs, right? It's kind of the umbrella of what would happen, God forbid something goes awry in the sense of the ownership of the company would disappear, or the leader of the certain department would leave unexpectedly, or you have to move on from someone. And these are things that you want to take into consideration just to make sure that the business itself continues to run smoothly and efficiently. And the easiest way that I've been a part of a few of them, and it's really just breaking it down by departments, kind of how we started it, and not necessarily looking at too much of the big picture, just kind of slicing it up and just go either department by department or team by team, however your company or firm is situated, and just start from the top of the leaders and determine, okay, here's a leader of this department, here's what their functions are, and here's what we need to do to make sure that the actual team itself continues to run smoothly. And then the other benefit, just besides having this, is at least I found that as I'm going through this, I'll identify certain processes or procedures that may need some tweaking or changing or even eliminating, because as I'm going through this, sometimes as we want to improve, we need to eliminate or maybe change something. And so running through these BCPs is also a good time and opportunity just to review some of your current processes too.
Oh, absolutely. And, business continuity plan is a big, fancy phrase. It sounds cool, right? I like saying it. It sounds fun to say. But a business continuity plan, the first step can be what happens when it snows? What happens if there's a hurricane? What do we do? So, Rebecca, can you kind of walk me through, you have one of those plans. Did you think of this as a business continuity plan when you were first making it, or how did you come about thinking about that sort of plan?
No, I think just coming from the mindset of practicing law, where we're always prepared for what if the other side doesn't do what they're supposed to? What if, this is impossible for X or Y reason? What if things change? So we're always sort of thinking in that same framework. So I think it's a little bit more natural maybe for attorneys to think of, well, what's the backup plan? And then what's the backup plan after that? And what's the backup plan after that? When we were really first getting started, COVID was still very much in the picture. And we had days where there would be some sort of contaminant in the office, right? And the building would be closed to get sanitized and all kinds of things like that. And so we were kind of prepared for remote work or mandatory remote work from the get-go. If the office is closed, you make sure you have your computer, you have your phone, you have everything you need so you can work remotely. Here's what that looks like and all of that. And so that, I think, made it a lot easier than when we were faced with a different issue. And so if there's a hurricane, if there's a snow day, if there's whatever, we already have all of that in place. We already are set up that our people can go home, stay safe, and still accomplish what they need to get done for the day.
That's true. And, you kind of talked about a lot of our growth occurred during COVID. So, as far as continuity planning goes, we were kind of born during the winter, as Tony Robbins likes to say. We were forced to start by giving people laptops, by undertaking the expense of giving people cell phones, because I remember those days, right? And I'm sure you do too, Dan, where you'd walk into an office and all of a sudden you have somebody come in hacking and sneezing. You send them home for a COVID test, and now I've got to shut the office down. I've got to have the office disinfected. And that's lightened up a little bit, but that was a form of business continuity planning. Another form of business continuity planning that I think a lot of people think about is data. So, Dan, can you kind of walk us through what business continuity would be as far as your company's data is concerned and access to that data?
Sure. There's just so much to that. I mean, you could look at it from a security standpoint. You can look at it from who has access now to maybe as you're planning in the future, if someone is unavailable to assess the data, who's next in line that you can trust. And as you were talking, one of the things that I was thinking about is when we're trying to plan this continuity, it's also a good opportunity to look at training. Who is a potential leader in that department or that team that could step up if need be? And then you just kind of start grooming them and allowing them to be able to maybe shadow one of the leaders or give them opportunities to be successful. So in a situation when you're looking at a potential, if it's a data breach, what are the steps that you're going to take? Do you automatically just unplug everything and shut down? Or is it, do you have to call your head of IT or whoever company you're working with IT? Because when you're talking about a breach, every millisecond matters. Mm-hmm. And that can become a very scary thing, not just from a liability, but just from what is being accessible from your own data and your client's information, your firm's information. And so when you're talking about data, if you're looking at the breach side, it's okay, what does that look like if there's potential a hack involved or something's been compromised? What do I need to do to secure what I have? But then what do I need to do to protect the future moving forward? And a lot of companies and firms aren't really thinking that way because they're like, well, it may not happen to me, or it only happens to these larger companies. I'm definitely not going to be a target. Nobody wants to hack my information because I'm a small company. Well, that's not necessarily the case, right? And so we need to plan for these types of situations, as going down all the way to weather, which can affect productivity, all the way up to a data breach, which has far more reaching effects to it. And so I would say if you're looking at the data side, make sure that you know what to do in case of a potential breach. But then also you want to look at if you have a leader that can't come in, or that you have to move on, or there's a trust issue, what do you do with that data? Do you just completely shut them out, or what does that look like? And so if you're in that situation, what does that plan going to be? Is it, okay, now we're going to maybe turn off certain access, or we're going to have discussions first, or do we monitor activity on that person's email and Teams and laptop? So there's a lot of things that need to be considered when you're just kind of going step by step as far as what does that look like. So if you are presented in these types of situations, it's a lot easier to be able to move forward and to overcome some of these obstacles, as opposed to just getting in that panic mode. And if you don't have that continuity, then not only do you have that anxiety and that stress and that pressure, but it's also, okay, your business could come to a halt, and now you're really affecting productivity and who you're servicing as clients. And then you have that whole snowball effect that if you just take the time to really just try to run through as many scenarios as you can, then you can really come out of it, hopefully not unscathed, but in a better position. And what Rebecca was saying is so true. As lawyers, we're always thinking of A through Z and back again. And okay, now if this happens, what about this way? And it's just the mindset that we have, but it's also the mindset that as a business owner, you really need to have. And if you don't have that, then bring on someone that can assist you. As you were talking about, maybe a coach or a mentor, someone that can kind of start guiding you through, what does this continuity look like? Where do you start? And then what do you tackle next? And just break it down one step at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were talking about team leaders, and I immediately had this vision of The Office where Dwight Schrute comes in and has a smoke thing and the microphone and screaming at everybody, and Stanley has a heart attack. So that's immediately what I thought about with like a team leader and let's go test it. Let's have fire drill. But continuity planning with the data, it's a little bit weird because you start talking about hacking, but there's also the physical location of your data. And Rebecca, can you kind of walk us through what continuity is for the physical location of your data, even though that seems so weird in our cloud-based society today?
Mhm. So you also, of course, always have to be thinking about insurance. And one of the things that our insurance provider brought up is, where is your physical data stored? So
Mhm.
if you have it just in the office with you, and the office building has some sort of natural disaster, there's a hurricane, there's flooding in the building, there's something like that, is all of your data sitting there on a hard drive that's also going to be destroyed? Or is it offsite, and where is it located offsite? And is it, above ground, or is it on the floor? And, there was a lot that actually went into that, which was surprising, but it also makes sense when you think through it. And so we did look at, where are we saving things on the cloud versus where are they physically located? How are things getting backed up? How frequently are they getting backed up? And if there is some sort of natural disaster that shuts one thing down, what other alternative options do we have? So that's definitely a consideration. The other thing with the insurance side, and this was more of a recent discovery, is if you have somebody who like hacks into your system and they are using ransomware, your insurance will not pay a ransom. So they will pay for if your business is like closed for the day and what you would have made in revenue for that day of closure, but they will not front ransom funds in order to get you back online. And so that's something to also just kind of be aware of as you're looking for data breach protection and things like that.
Well, that's 100% accurate because what you're talking about is part of business continuity is having such a great relationship with your insurance broker that they explain this stuff to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because prior to this relationship, I sat in meetings together with you and an insurance broker who absolutely tried to mislead us into thinking like, oh, there's ransomware, we cover everything.
Right.
Okay, what is everything? Make sure that you're always asking, and insurance is part of business continuity planning, but ask what is everything? Are you going to cover illegal activity, which is the payment of the ransom? Well, no. Insurance companies don't cover that. They're not going to go get a bunch of Bitcoin and set out a policy maximum, because if they set a policy maximum of $250,000, every ransomware in the country would start being $200, right? Like every other insurance policy. It wouldn't take long for people to figure this out. In speaking with the people I was speaking with, one of the pieces of advice they had for data was every 6 months, run a test. Pretend that your system got hacked and see what happens. Like Dan was saying, it's milliseconds. How, part of our business continuity planning has been laptops. That means we have all of these points of access floating around wherever they may be. And how do we get all of those shut down immediately or deny every single person in the organization access so we can shut down complete access? So when you're working with your head of IT and you're working with your vendors, you need to make sure that part of your agreement is every quarter, every half year, you're going to be running a test. Okay, let's do this. After hours, so not to interrupt business, but let's run a test. We just got hacked. Now what? Let's run a test. There was a hurricane. Where's my data? Is it on an offsite backup? Yes, great. It's on an offsite backup that backs up how frequently? Is it hourly, daily, weekly? What is it? Where does it physically sit? What would the seat? Because two of our offices sit in hurricane-prone locations. We have to be aware of that. The next part of this is business continuity planning. Everything gets shut down, and Dan kind of alluded to this. How do you continue to pay your bills? So, Dan, what is a business continuity plan for that?
Right. Well, as you were talking, I was thinking just real quick on Rebecca just made an excellent point in a sense. Check that policy, because human instinct would be, oh, I'll just pay the ransomware and get out of this and we'll be back. But you could be setting yourself up for failure and in breach of your own policy. So that's a huge tip that a lot of owners don't think of. And it's just, unfortunately, some of these are trial by error. But as far as making sure that you're being able to move forward from a financial standpoint, it's always just, I would say this, check the bank account on a daily basis. Make sure that the accounts, nothing looks funky in there, that you have enough cash in the bank. You always want to make sure that I kind of try to use 3 to 6 months, depending upon the size of your firm or company, to be able to cover payroll if something would happen. So you have enough cash in the bank to be able to get through and weather whatever storm or issue that you're going to have. But it's just having conversations with the bank saying, okay, if this happens, what will it look like for me? I have these loans that are outstanding. Talk to your loan providers. What does it look like if there is an act of God, or you are compromised in some way? Is there any type of provision in the policy that would allow not necessarily forgiveness, but would allow a little bit more time to pay, or there isn't any penalty, or you're not being hit with any type of late fees, or they may even cancel you? And so it's just reviewing insurance policies, but also all policies and any loans that you have that you're taking out. You want to make sure that you're, of course, complying with them. But what would happen if you are compromised in whatever way, right? If it's from an intruder, or if it's from being hacked, if it's from being weather related, any type of situation you can think of, just make sure that you're able to move forward. But if you can't, what does that look like, and what is the plan in place? Is if you are compromised in some way and you can't financially make payments, whether it's payroll or loans or bills, that you just completely shut down and do nothing. You want to be able to think worst case scenario. So if it happens, this is the next step. And then this is the step if that step doesn't work. So you can just continue to hopefully be more efficient, but still provide service to clients, because you also don't want to just shut down and stop providing service to clients or producing product, because once you weather whatever storm that's happening, it's going to be hard to come out from underneath if you can at all. And so it's just making sure you're aware of what your risks are and what you need to do if certain things happen.
That's absolutely correct. And, putting money in the bank, because when something like this happens, there's going to be 10 things to deal with, or 100 things to deal with. And the last thing, like you said, you want to deal with is I can't make payroll. So now I got to lay people off. So my ability to produce is going down. My ability to service clients is going down. So instead of getting through this in 2 months, it's going to take me 3 years to get back to where I was, because I lost employees, I lost clients, I lost market share, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. Rebecca, can you kind of walk us through the idea of continuity planning from the financial department? So Dan earlier talked about, we have overarching business continuity ideas. Now we start breaking those down in different departments. Well, what about a financial department? How do you ensure business continuity in the financial department?
So having all of your procedures written down somewhere is definitely helpful. If you have one person that you're completely reliant on and everything about their job is just stored in their brain, what happens if that person gets sick? What happens if they quit? What happens if any number of things happen? So making sure that you're keeping up-to-date instructions on what it is they do, how to access the information they need, where everything is located, that it's somewhere in writing, so that when you bring on a replacement, they can step in and they understand what they need to do. You're not going to have a whole bunch of gaps in the system. And on the financial side, that can mean like your collections procedure. So if you're processing payments, how does that work? Where do you go to do that? How frequently are you charging people? Making sure that you're following up on any kind of delinquent accounts, all of those things. And it needs to be in writing and completely clear on who is doing what and when. So that's one piece of it. The other is, like Dan mentioned, monitoring your bank accounts and making sure that there's no questionable transactions, making sure all of your bills line up with what's coming out, liquidity, or as much liquidity as you can. Because as they always say, cash is king. So if you end up having a shortfall on cash and you don't have anything else that you can easily turn into cash, that's where you'll run into a problem. Maybe you own a big building, or maybe you own some other type of asset, but it's something that you can't convert and access quickly. So making sure you have access to cash and lines of credit and things like that, so that if you do have a shortfall, you're able to just recover and move forward.
And, you touched on something that I want to talk about in the next episode, and that was paying attention. So I want to thank both you, Dan, and Rebecca, for joining me today to talk about business continuity planning, something with a really cool phrase that a lot of people don't think about. And if you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe. If you have questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. We love to answer questions from people. This actually is a question that we got from somebody. How do I plan for the worst? So hit subscribe, and we look forward to talking to you next week, part 2 of Business Continuity.
Hi, this is Dan Cuneo with the Business Blueprint. Thank you for taking time to listen to this week's podcast. Please join us next week for part 2.
Thanks for tuning in. If you found this insightful and entertaining, be sure to hit subscribe below and join us on social media to get more insight into what we are going through each and every day.